And thanks for making time to do this outside of our normal talking stick session. We had some things we wanted to talk about that were ACE specific, so we wanted to split up the group this month. As usual, we'll begin with a quick disclaimer. This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred. All right. So today we're going to spend some time discussing budget revisions, which I know is a hot topic for many of you, a little touch on some GEPRA measure pieces and implementation requirements, and then some reminders about the PD meeting coming up in April, as well as some other upcoming technical assistance events. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Bianca Williams to welcome you as well.
Hello, everyone. I apologize you can't see me. I have been having some Zoom problems lately, so hopefully we get that worked out. But yeah, I know that we were having an enriched conversation the last time about our budget revisions, and I just felt that we needed to spend some more time on understanding what we're looking for, and just, answer more questions. And, this is mainly for whoever has questions. Still, I know we're working through some of the budget revisions. I apologize, I can't see the slide, so if I'm, rambling or off topic, I apologize. But yeah, we just want to, make sure that it's very clear on what is direct services, what's admin costs, how to include indirect costs on, contracts, just really anything to help get the budgets looking more like the ACE structure we're looking for. We thought it was important to separate the talking stick session today because NYCP also has budgets due, and we don't want to confuse what to submit. So please, if you are a NYCP director, that you join us in the next hour for the talking stick session. But
thank you, Bianca. I just joined and I couldn't decide if I was supposed to be at the 10 a.m. or the 11 a.m.
Yeah, so, if you're a project director for both ACE and NYCP, you can, join for both. But I just think it's been kind of confusing when we have two different programs and talking about budgets. We have some NYCP budgets, asking questions about ACE things. And, we just want to make sure it's very clear. But, we know, and another big reminder that we kind of want to make sure that's happening is that, things are still getting done. I know that we're waiting for budget revisions. A lot of it is, in question is the implementation period. But when you're in your planning period, we do want to make sure you're, spending your funds. We don't want to have large available balances at the end of the year. So, based on what was approved, if you have any major questions, if you're waiting on me to start spending, hopefully you're not, you have personnel to pay and things like that. But make sure that, the planning period's really to help build that ACE structure and to get ready to provide services. Another big thing that I wanted to, use this time for is to go over what's needed before you start implementing. I know a lot of people, or a lot of programs are planning on implementing before the new fiscal year. So we want to make sure, that it's not overlapping with your planning period. So we want, You don't want to be providing any type of services during your planning period. And to end your planning period, there's a couple of things that need to be submitted. This is just, more for you guys. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about things you already know. So of course, if there's any questions or concerns around the budget, I want you guys to either put it in the chat so Sarah can read it to me, or hop on the phone and ask me. But this time is really, for you all.
Yeah, and we do have a couple of questions coming in the chat. So as y'all are thinking of your questions, pop those in, and I'm going to kind of run through them in the order that I'm receiving them. The first question I got was talking about allowable expenses during the planning period. And could we kind of review what's allowable to spend during the planning period versus the implementation period?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, right now during your planning period, you can do things like marketing some services. You can do things like surveying your families to see what services are needed. If you're going to build a structure like an app or a website for your program, you definitely can be doing that. If it's, I would also say, towards the end of the planning period, if you wanted to use like the last couple of months to already have staff on board, if they're providing direct services maybe, but we don't want to see them as a full year if they can't provide direct services, and if they're not doing something that's building the project in the planning period, we can't just pay them. So, we can see a lot more things happening towards the end of the planning period if it's like buying some supplies or material before you're actually implementing the services. You definitely can do that. But also we don't want to see we're using, let's, for example, say we're going to buy, 20 laptops each year. So in the planning period, you have 20 laptops. We don't want to see every year with it, because that planning period laptop should be really for use for the first year, because you're not providing services in that planning period. So, this is really just time to get ready. I think the planning period is super useful in this complex program. You see how hard it's been to kind of get the budgets together and review everything, but it gives us time to, really figure out what programs are needed and just, work out some of those difficulties, because we're in a pandemic right now and with COVID, and, we might need to change some things, and needs for families and students might be different. So, this time is very useful to really do that research to make sure the project that you planned is working for your community. But if there's anything particular, questions about planning period, I think, overall, nothing to provide services would make sense in the planning period time. Anything to kind of build up and be able to provide those services would be fine. But, I don't know if there's any particular item or something specific that someone wanted questions on.
This is Quentin with Tedna.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Quentin. Yes, I can. Hello, can you hear me?
I don't think he's able to hear us. So Quentin, if you can pop your question in the chat box, and then we'll run through those. There was a question about finding the PowerPoint of the presentation that talked about per student pricing. So I'm uploading into the chat box the personnel and services, the contracts, and the orientation webinar PowerPoints. So that you can reference those. We talk about per student costs in all three of them, so that may be helpful. So I've got those there for you. They're loading, so it will take just a second for all three to pop up. The next question is asking about if a budget revision was submitted in the suggested format, which breaks out the 80/20, when can they expect to hear if they're good to go? Their planning period ends at the end of March.
So, a lot of people should have received feedback on questions. Definitely, revise what's needed or provide more justification. But we do want to make sure, before the implementation that the budgets are agreed upon. I really do think most people have a good idea of how to use the planning period. I think it's just becoming very tricky with the direct services. So ideally, before we start implementing, let's make sure that our budget years during our implementation years is ready to go. I know, being off a month and a half and then coming into having all day trainings and meetings all the time, that it has been really hard to get the budgets together. It's not just, it's not just looking at a budget or a NYCP budget. It's so complex. I'm always asking questions to colleagues or attorneys to make sure it's making sense. And, I'm definitely trying to get them out. I believe everyone who has submitted their budget on time has probably received something back from me. I still have a couple more to get to, and hopefully tomorrow and on Monday. I don't have too many meetings that I'm planning on finishing those up. So if you have not received a revised budget or questions, that it will be coming very soon, within the next couple of days. Oh, yay, I can see the slides. This is helpful. So hopefully we can, get those done and cleared up. If you are trying to implement immediately and you haven't heard back from me, please reach out again and make sure that you're ready to go. We have everything that's needed before you start implementing. I know I have, next week really is, besides, actually Monday's a holiday. And then I have all day training, and then Thursday is probably like my one free day. So like in the next couple of weeks too, that I'll have some more time for like one-on-one calls. I was able to do a couple in the last couple of weeks, and that has been very useful and helpful. When we see things on the Excel sheet or your budget, it's, numbers with not that much information, but sometimes, you can definitely justify some costs once we have those talks. So I know it's super important for me to reach out to each individual who I have like big concerns on their budget. And, a lot of the same questions that I'm sending out are, a lot of the questions I'm sending out are the same for many grantees. And it's really, I want to get feedback too. I know that it's kind of hard to change budgets when you planned on doing a project one way, or you're used to spending a budget one way. Please, be vocal about these problems. I am advocating for you all, and I really want to make sure that, your voices are heard, and that, we can come up with some type of solution or something together. Because I understand I'm not trying to be an enemy when I'm questioning some costs. I understand, how it will work for your community, but then there's people who are expecting the ACE budgets and structure to look one way. So, please be vocal. But, we're definitely trying to meet in the middle, and, figure it out and make this ACE project work for all your communities. And every single one of your projects are completely different. Every single one of your communities are different. So, I understand the challenges that this you know, putting this project together, y'all are facing. So, you know, please have some patience. We're getting to it. I'm still trying to understand some things or how ACE is supposed to look. As many questions you have, I probably have twice as many that's going forward. So, yeah, we're all in the same boat. I think that we can make it work, though. You know, I think it's helpful hearing from you guys. I think it's helpful when we come together like this, because we're all kind of facing similar situations getting this project going.
Thanks, Bianca. So the next
Bianca?
question- let's run through the questions in the chat box right quick so that we can handle those in the order in which they've been received. And then if we have time remaining, we can also take any that maybe you feel like need to be addressed over the phone or over the audio in more detail. But I want to make sure we get to those that folks have already put in the chat box. So we had a question about the things that have to be submitted by the end of the planning period before you can start implementation. We are going to cover that right after this budget revision discussion. And so I'm going to save it for that so that you can see the slide and all the information there. The next question are two questions about vendors. One is an RFP and bidding proposals required? And are vendors required to submit student progress reports?
Can you repeat the first one?
Absolutely. Yeah, I got tongue tied in the middle anyway. Is an RFP and bidding proposal required?
So I think that best practice is considered getting 3 different bids. I know if you cannot get 3 different bids due to your situation or your remote area, that you can justify that. So, you know, please make sure that we are, you know, using sound judgment and not just getting the most expensive contract or vendor that can serve your area. But of course, if that's the only vendor in your area, please provide that justification and information as well. So,
and actually that relates to another question, so I'm going to pop it in here. Someone was asking for those, if it is something where there's only one provider in the area available, so they're going to need to do a sole source contract, do they need to get additional approvals for that prior to doing that?
So yeah, I think, you know, letting us know that, you know, that cost or that vendor, you know, I know some projects are in very remote areas that may be the only one that's available, but again, we can't assume that. So we please provide, you know, some documentation and just letting us know that, you know, you've looked for other vendors, but this is the best, you know, and for your community or the only one in your community.
And are vendors required to submit student progress reports?
So, you know, you are responsible for your vendors. I think it's really important when you have your service provider agreement to make sure that you are getting the outcome results. You know, you want to make sure that if your goal is for all 9th grade students to increase, you know, their science grade, and you're vending, you know, your vendors providing the science, that you would definitely want to make sure that they're holding up to reach your goal. So, you know, I don't know, each agreement can look different. It just kind of, you know, depends if they have access to certain information. You know, maybe you might not have access to the school grade information, but you can get access to like the participation rate from that vendor. So, you know, I don't think that it's going to be, it's going to really be up to you on how you hold that vendor accountable to reaching the goals you set forth for your project.
Well, and the next question is about travel. So it's an Alaskan grantee. They're building out their website, but with remoteness, travel's huge for them. They're planning as if travel is going to be happening, but it's looking pretty dismal. Do you want to see their contingency plans as well?
I think that's great that you have contingency plans. You know, I think the future is very unknown right now with COVID, and especially with travel. But, you know, I think if you can submit a revision as necessary. If you know, right now with the budgets we're looking at is really just making sure you're understanding the difference between that direct cost versus the admin and structural costs. If you need to submit a budget revision, you know, due to travel restrictions or converting to remote style of learning, we can do that at any time. So, you know, definitely I would highly suggest having a contingency plan. You do not need to submit it right now, but we do want to make sure that everyone, you know, has a plan to spend funds that will meet those project goals. So, you know, hold off if you know, I don't know if your travel is going to happen next school year. But if that's the case, I think, you know, we can submit a plan with the new award funds. So, you know, right now, when I'm looking at, like, so much is really going to change with this project, you know, as you can change service providers. Maybe students might like one service more than another, you know, so budget revisions are going to be very, very common with this project to meet the goals and the need of the community. But I think, you know, the main purpose for the budget right now is just that general understanding of what costs are allowable and, you know, the restricted cost of the admin and indirect costs and so on. So it's great that you have it. Please, like, you know, I think maybe, you know, another talking stick session, we can base it all around contingency plans, so just for preparation on, you know, I know a lot of projects we are planning on, you know, coming together and traveling and doing so much, but we do got to have a plan B during these times.
Right. Okay, so next question. Our project is working on establishing the Parent Advisory Council and also working on the pilot summer credit recovery camp for this summer. So I'm seeing this, but I'm thinking there might be a part to this question that I missed. Karen, if you don't mind putting in, are you asking if that's allowable? Because so the Parent Advisory Council, if you're in your planning period, the Parent Advisory Council would be allowable, but a summer credit recovery camp with students would have to be during your implementation period. Anything where you're delivering.
So technically you can do it now, but then during the summertime. And I mean, you can have parent advisory or parent feedback a part of your project, but that would still have to be a part of that 20% cost. So, you know, if you want to start doing the credit recovery as a direct service, we would need to switch into that 80-20% budget framework that we don't have in the planning period.
Yeah, so basically you'd be starting your implementation period earlier. All right, let's see. Next up, making sure I'm in here. The question was, the personnel and services slides were the January 28th webinar. Yes, that is correct. And don't you follow your procurement policies for your organization?
Yes, you definitely should, you know, follow local and tribal procurement process.
All right. The next question, kind of on the same with the vendors. Do all vendors require a contract? For instance, if you're offering welding at a community college, would the community college need to have a contract, or would they just pay the student fees for the students to participate in that welding class?
So you still would need to have a service provider agreement in place um, with all service providers. So, you know, I understand that, you know, we're paying the fees for the students, but we still want to make sure that, like, what if a student may drop out of that welding class? So now we want to make sure that that service provider plan would be to, you know, replace the student rather than just to have the money for the student that's not there. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're liable for the funds that we're giving the service provider, as well as the outcome, you know, that we're looking for too. So, you know, some sort of service provider agreement should be placed with all service providers, even if it's an independent contract, if it's a big organization like Boys and Girls Club and so on. There definitely should be a written agreement in place.
Great. Then there was kind of a follow-up question that I think we addressed, but Laura, please let me know in the chat if that didn't quite get to what you were asking. There's also a question about someone who had to rejoin. I will pop those slides back in. It just takes 1 second for them to re-upload, but I'll get those back in there. Can we require students to sign up for our ACE program and fill out forms that would allow us to track their grades or progresses so we can see improvements? So basically, it's a two-parter. Can you require students to sign up for the ACE program? And then secondly, as part of that registration process, could they ask them to fill out a form as kind of a registration requirement that would ask for access to their grades?
So hopefully I'm answering the first part right. We cannot require a certain service. Like, every service under ACE should be selected by the family or the student. So if you're offering, you know, a service and you still have 5 other service providers, you cannot have a program where it's mandatory they select or have your service that you're providing. You know, how you set up how many they can select and the amount for each is completely up to you, but it's not like, oh, every 3rd grader will receive this guidance counseling, or you know, every service that is being provided should be selected.
Great. And then the second part of that would be, if a student though chooses to sign up for the ACE program, could part of the registration process be that they are required to complete a form giving access to their grades?
I think that kind of goes back to like privacy laws that may be different for each school and state. I'm not 100% sure if we can require a minor. I know we talked about this before, and I might, you know, need to go back and see if I have notes on this or get some more answers. I don't know if Donna Sabisford is on and she can answer that, but I don't know if we can require it.
I think we were saying that with parent permission, that they have a parent permission signature on file, that could be the ticket for that one.
Okay, so if the parent may need to be a part of that, then
Yeah.
And I will definitely look into this a little bit more too, just to make sure. I don't know if it's just different by, you know, schools or states. I just remember this being a very lengthy conversation before, like a year ago. But I do, you know, especially dealing with minors, so that makes sense if the parent, you know, agrees to it or I'll follow
All
up.
right. Next one, can marketing costs include hiring someone to create a logo or brand for the program?
So we cannot use the funds to build a company. So hopefully you, have a logo or your business that your service you're providing is kind of already a part of, has some marketing tools like a logo. But I definitely can see like if they're building, a website to feature the selection process or things like that needs to be added. But yeah, we definitely shouldn't be building the capacity of service providers with these funds. And I can see them saying, building or creating a logo. But again, if you're making it, in this A structure, or you're creating like an app or something that you want to include your logo on, you definitely can get a web designer to make sure, it looks how it's needed for your project.
Right. And then there was a ask for a little more clarification on the difference between a contracted service and a fee paid for service, or a fee paid for a product. So for instance, if they're paying for a student to be able to participate in an SAT prep class versus if they themselves are contracting with someone to offer an SAT class exclusively for ACE participants.
So it kind of sounds like the service, if you're providing the service of maybe, SAT or ACT prepping as the grantee, that may be a cost that's, associated under, the service that you're providing, which kind of makes it a little different. But if you're going to like a tutoring program that provides SAT, services, then that's a little different. We would definitely want an agreement with that service provider. But if you're providing the service, I do remember, there definitely should be an agreement in place with yourself. If that makes sense, that you're, have it written out that you're going to provide SAT test prep for 50 kids and ACT test prep for 50 kids. But if, 75 kids want SAT over ACT, you have something written out in place for you as a service provider. So that's just, there should be some type of oversight because you're providing the services as well. But, if that's just the fees that you're paying as the service provider, then that should all be a part of, the agreement that you have with basically yourself to provide the services. Does that make sense?
Let me recap and see if what I heard is what you were saying, and maybe that'll help for everyone else as well. So
Yeah.
if a grantee is going to provide Class A for themselves with their staff, they need to have an agreement, a service provider agreement with themselves, denoting the same things from that contracts webinar that they would denote with an external service provider. If, second option, they're contracting with an outside organization, and that outside organization is going to offer that class, then they would need to have a service agreement with that external provider. And then the one that I think may be a little more unclear is option C. If, say, there's an online class and they're just buying a seat in that class for that student, would they have to contract with that organization, Or could they just offer that as a service and they're paying that as a fee?
I almost feel like that would kind of fall into the same as option A, but I do see the difference.
I think
I think
many
that
kind of
still would,
thought of it almost like a supply cost, like if they were offering a backpack of school supplies, that they would buy that out of their funds and supply that product, just like they would pay that seat fee and then let them attend that particular class, but they themselves or the external organization aren't actually offering the full class.
yeah. So I think that, kind of would, if that's still a fee base that, that still is accounted for under your own agreement. We don't want, what we don't want to happen, and why we need to make sure like we even have an agreement with ourselves, is that all the options are fair. We can't offer one kid the option to take it online and not another kid or something. So we need to make sure that in the agreement with providing services that that's stated and clear. So if it's a fee base, just like if it was supplies, I would still think that would fall under the grantee to make sure that the supplies was delivered, that it went to the right student, that it is going to reach one of the goals that we agreed upon in the application. So I think if it's something online, if it's tangible, it still would be on the grantee.
Okay.
So, just make sure that, it's fair, that if, one student wants it, that another student will be able to have access to it, that, that you have something in the end too. Like sometimes, it's like, okay, maybe the student should send proof that they took the class. We're not just, paying for it and not ever seeing any outcome from it. So, it's just kind of your checks and balances more than anything.
Yeah. All right. I hope that helped everybody with those kind of options. Of course, let us know in the chat if there's still some more clarification, but I think I got it. So I'm hoping that was kind of really clearing stuff up for y'all as well. All right. The next one is asking about like with a community college. So one of the options is they could pay for a student to participate in like a community college class, maybe a dual enrollment class, but after a certain day, of course, fees can't be returned. So if a student were to drop after a certain day, they're still going to be liable for that fee. That's just something that they would need to denote in their service provider agreement, correct?
Yeah, and I think it's something to think about too, like, maybe letting the student know that if they do drop a class that we're not going to pay for like the next semester or something. I know, when a student receives any type of scholarship or grant, that there's always like, grades or attendance is a big part of the accountability to receive it. So yeah, I mean, of course we can't force people are nature, so we, they're always unpredictable, but we just, want to make sure that we're doing the best we can to spend our funds wisely.
Yeah, great. The other one is a little bit of a clarification on kind of the bidding and that process. So I know we said you need to be following your organization's policies in regards to bidding and vendors and things like that, as well as any of the pieces that are required with the ACE program as far as the service agreement. You shared that it's typically best practice to get the 3 bids and that you would like them to share with you if they're going to be using a sole source provider. The question that was still kind of remaining is, are they required to do an RFP if their organization's policies don't require an RFP?
Um, I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if Donna wants to chime in, or I can write it down to ask Jill about.
Yeah, let's write
That's
that
a
one
good
down.
question.
All right, so we're going to double check that and get back to you with a clarification on that one. Okay. Next up, what if parents are wanting to not send their child to school and they want to move to a boarding school or opt to homeschool? Could that be a service option?
Um, I I'm thinking it can, maybe with some more information on how the actual service would be provided, I guess like funding for it, or like what would be the actual service if would it just be monetary, or
Helen, if you're able to unmute, could you share kind of what it is you were thinking around the boarding school homeschool option?
Well, with our situation out in the villages, we have 6 different villages that we as a school district try to serve. And many of these villages, they feel very unsafe about going back into the classroom, and they want to keep their children at home. And right now, that's just absolutely killing them academically. So they're like, well, we're just going to homeschool, but yet that isn't an option really for them because the parents aren't qualified to homeschool them academically as far as our state standards go and that type of thing. So, we're still accountable for these students, but I feel if we don't offer something, we're just going to have students dropping out of school right and left without providing services for them. So if we provided, and know too that no one in the village has internet. Unless they come to school, they do not have internet services. So doing like Sylvan or an online tutoring program is not an option unless they come to school. So we're sitting in a real dilemma. If anyone would like to chat about what they're doing when parents are making these types of decisions in a very remote village, how do we as a school district support that, and can these funds help us do so?
So thank you, Helen. I mean, a couple of things came to mind when you were speaking. You can use the funds to provide supplies. So I don't know if it's like, hotspots or laptops. You also can, contract maybe with actual teachers to provide homeschooling. But, what we probably can't do would be use the funds to, qualify or get certification for parents or things like that. So I think that there's, some things that could be allowable, and, we can, spend more time on it. I don't know if any other grantees have suggestions for, involving, students or getting them interested in more things. I know one grantee, was using transportation. The funds were included to, have people go out into the communities. I've seen transportation funds used to get students to go to different services or to a service that could be provided. So, I think there's ways at getting at it. I don't know, exactly what you had in mind, but I'm sure we can support it in, so many ways.
Ellen, this is Donna. Do you guys have any problem with state truancy laws or anything like that? Or is there any support for that kind of thing?
No, we have no support with that at all. Not at all.
Oh,
And we have seen some students only 10 days the entire year since last March.
yeah. Okay. There's some good suggestions in the chat box. Can you see them?
I was going to say,
I
Pamela
can.
shared about some GED options, and Dara at Navajo Preparatory was offering to kind of chat about some of the things that's worked for them. And I'm happy to help connect you with email addresses for each other so you can chat. Or you're welcome to exchange them yourselves in the chat box as well. Trying to get in the last couple of questions here as we're really nearing time, but they were clarifying, if you as the grantee are providing direct services, then you need to draw up an agreement with yourself that includes those contract requirements, correct? And yes, that's what Bianca was sharing, that you would need to do that just like you would for a service provider, because you, the grantee, are also a service provider. Next question, the fee for a purchased product or service bought in bulk would be divided by the students who use it, correct?
So I do want to be careful about buying some things in bulk because, of course, that would need to be selected by the students. So unless you have, that the community report or information that says that they would like that item in bulk, or, a lot of students would need it, then yes. And then that fee, of course, would be divided by how many students selected it. So yeah, please be, mindful that we're purchasing things that would be used and selected by the students.
All right, next up, we pay about $800 to set up internet for our rural students, another $1,200 in laptops, plus $200 to $300 a month in internet fees, taking us 3 months to get 20 students set up. And let's see, Pamela, I'm not sure what the question on that particular one, if that's an allowable piece.
No, that was for the
The
For
idea.
Helen.
yeah, for Helen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. All right. And like I said, we are getting super close to time. So I do want to go over and share the information again about what it is that needs to be complete prior to starting your implementation period. I know many of you are nearing the end of your planning period and wanted to be sure that you knew exactly what needs to be submitted to Bianca prior to starting your implementation period. So you can submit these via email to her. You'll need to submit all 4 things: a description of the operational service selection process, a description of the operational parent involvement and feedback process, a sample written agreement between the grantee and service providers. So this is a twofer. So the sample written agreement, as well as a list of providers with whom you've signed written agreements. So all of those service providers, including yourself if applicable. And then the 4th one, a description of the process that's going to be used to choose students to be served in the event that demand for services exceeds available capacity in your program or for a particular service. So those are the 4 things that will be submitted to Bianca prior to starting your implementation period. So for those of you who are nearing that end point. Additionally, I do want to make sure, and if we have time, we're going to pop back in and do some more questions, but I want to make sure that everyone knows about the events that are coming up. I know many of you have been doing the distance learning series. We also have project planning and reporting coming up. All of you who are ACE grantees have been invited to the February 18th session. Some of you who are also NYCP grantees may have also received the one for February 25th. If you received both, you're welcome, of course, to attend both, but I would really encourage you to prioritize the 18th session, as that will be the most applicable to your ACE grant. And then I really want to point out the Talking Stick session for next month on March 11th. And not listed on the slide, but a plug for office hours. So office hours is set up for us to be able to have those more informal conversations. It is a pop in, pop out time to be able to ask questions, get feedback. You're able to come on camera, unmute, and really have conversations about those things that you have questions about. We do those monthly. They are not required sessions. It's just for those who may have some questions and want to talk those through. So I'm going to pop in the chat box the link for that. Our next one coming up this month is on February 25th at 1 p.m. So I'll pop that right in the chat box. So if you want to make yourself a reminder to tune in for that, that'll be a great opportunity to answer some more questions and have some more conversation around things there. And then wrapping up here with our contact information. Remember, you can always reach out to Bianca as well as to the OIE Technical Assistance team. Both email addresses there. I'm going to pop up our final fast finger poll here and try to hit at least one more question before we're at time. So when there's a question about could we repeat the things that are required? I can also send those out via email so that you make sure and have it, as well as in those slide decks that I popped in the chat box. They are in those slide decks too. So you'll have that in both places. And yes, we will be sending out the slides for this. It won't be until tomorrow because I have to process the recording, but yes, we definitely can. The info regarding GEPRA, yes, we will address that during the February 18th session. No worries there. And seeing how many more I can hit before we're right at time. All right. I appreciate you doing that fast finger poll. We're also going to pop over in the chat box our feedback survey. That's super helpful. I do want to point out something that we haven't really talked about in regards to the feedback survey before, but if you are popping in anything in the comment sections that you would hope that we would follow up with you on, if you're asking a question or you need follow-up, please make sure to indicate who you are, because those feedback surveys are anonymous. So if you don't let me know who you are in the comment box as well, I don't have a way to answer your question or follow up with you if you were asking for something in the actual feedback survey. But if you have 2 to 3 minutes, we would really appreciate you doing that. We are going to continue these conversations. Please let us know if you have more questions as you are working through your planning period and your budget revisions and starting implementation. We are right at time, and I know you may have other events to go to, or maybe joining us on the NYCP Talking Stick right after this. So I thank you for taking part and for all of your great questions, and we will see you next time.